What do you see when you look at this photograph? Lights, shades, colors, tones, an aesthetic abstract rendering that's appealing to the eye. At least, that's what I was thinking the first time I saw it 6 years ago. Now, what do you see when you look closer? Something much more sinister. Turned out to be a few ships and a whole lot of oil. This is an aerial photograph taken by Spanish photographer Daniel Beltrán of the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. Its extraordinarily beautiful green and orange landscape takes a completely different meaning once you grasp the environmental catastrophe that hides behind its shades of blue. 134 million gallons of oil that are still destroying the oceanic habitat a decade later. Thousands of marine animals immediately and latently killed. I'm Rosario Lebrija Rassvetaieff, and today I want to talk to you about the future of the image, how photography can be used as a language to educate and catalyze real change. I didn't know back then that this was the moment that would transform my life. The book with the striking cover was the 5th volume of the Prix Pictet, the leading award in photography and sustainability that I help manage today. It initially drew me in with its beauty, but it kept me hooked with a horrifying and inescapable message, the reality of what we're doing to our planet. It introduced me to a world where, rather than documenting endless selfies and avocado toast, which we've all been guilty of doing, photography is used as a language to transmit the most pressing social and environmental issues facing humanity today. So today, as we explore some of the work of some of the greatest photographers alive, I want you to stop and take a moment to think about your relationship to the image. But why, you might be asking yourself? Well, if you've listened to the podcast that I host, A Lens on Sustainability, you might have heard Jeff Rosenheim, curator of photography at the Met in New York, say, "We are living in an ocular era." Jeff argues that you cannot be literate in the world today if you don't understand the power dynamics between the image and the world. And he's right. The first permanent cameras of the early 19th century were complex. They required time, a dark room, hours of exposure. Today, the photograph has become ubiquitous. Everyone can take a picture. If I were to ask you to take out your phone right now, how many images would you find on your camera roll? 60? 600? 6,000? And how many of these are actually meaningful? How many are just static, noise? We are bombarded by images everywhere we look, blown up on billboards as we walk down the streets, on menus at restaurants, texts from friends, magazines, television, and of course, social media. Take a look at this photograph titled 24 Hours of Photographs by Eric Kessel, who was nominated for the Prix Pictet during its 7th cycle. Kessel printed out all images uploaded to the internet in a 24-hour period to literally reproduce the amount of space taken up in our heads by other people's experiences. Over 1 million pictures line the walls of this room. This picture was taken in 2010. How many images would line this room today? How many rooms will we need for the incoming decade? Flickr, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, all of these platforms transgress the public and the private, blurring and recasting our identities as they bear and overshare the intimate details of other people's lives. And many of these images are photoshopped to create unsustainable and unreachable archetypes that make life seem unbearable to those of us who view them. As a consequence, we are already seeing alarming rates of mental health illness in the people who view these platforms the most. millennials, and Generation Z. Teenagers are increasingly facing anxiety, depression, eating disorders that are catalyzed by the disparities between their online and offline persona. The constant comparison to their peers' artificial online life. The constant pressure to be happy. Young women like me are particularly affected by these photoshopped images that only show younger and prettier and healthier versions of ourselves. So not only has the photographic image become fake news, its overconsumption has made us desensitized to its message. And yet, the photograph remains humankind's universal language. A photo is worth 1,000 words. I'm sure you've heard that one before. But it remains fundamentally true. You do not need to utter a word to communicate. It speaks through the image alone in a million different ways to a million different people. It allows you to experience the world in the eyes of another. So, how do we recognize a good photograph from the never-ending stream of images sent our way? For me, this is where the sublime comes in. The sublime is defined as impressing on the mind with a sense of grandeur or power, inspiring veneration, awe. I first came across this word while growing up in Mexico City. I took an art history class where my professor described Caspar David Friedrich's Wander above the sea of fog as sublime. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. It's a 19th century oil painting that shows a man standing on a cliffside, staring out into a sea of fog, and the roaring waves that crash against the rocks he stands on. His back is to the viewer, showing the smallness of man in the face of something as grand as this sea. It is both beautiful and terrifying. And I think life and all that comes with it, love, death, loneliness, melancholy, is both beautiful and terrifying. And I think really great photographs that do not allow the audience the luxury of feigning ignorance and ignoring their message, all have the sublime in them. An image that is so beautiful, and not beauty in its appeal to pleasure, but in its sublime beauty. It draws you in, and it is only after you are inevitably in its grasp that you fully understand the innate message it is trying to transmit. Let's look at some examples. Irish photographer Richard Moss won the Prix Pictet in 2017 for his series Heat Maps. This image is intriguing, a puzzle you want to detangle. By the time you realize this starry campsite is in fact a migrant encampment housing refugees from the Middle East and North Africa in Greece, it is too late to remain undisturbed. Impressive and complex compounds, these camps are sanctuaries to thousands, only to disappear months later, leaving no trace of the life and horrors they witnessed. The sublime power of this image, its enormity, only increases when you find out that Moss used the military-grade thermographic camera that is registered as a weapon under international law to take this picture. A cold technology that reduces, dehumanizes its subject as an objective enemy, produces this sublime image that humanizes it once more through their body language, the very evidence that they are alive. Now that is what I mean by an image speaking 1,000 words. A second example of sublime imagery can be found in Mandy Barker's Beyond Drifting, Imperfectly Known Animals. I was instantly attracted to these images the first time I saw them. They show a light, fluttering, floating organism that is encased by what seems to be a scientific microscope. Enchanted, I turned to learn more. And it turned out that Mandy was photographing plastic in bodies of water as if it were one more microscopic marine organism. She normalized the plastic as one more animal in the water. And I actually interviewed Mandy, and she told me that these images seduce with fluttering colors that make the viewer confront the chilling degradation and contamination of our natural environment, how plastic particles have seeped into every corner of our planet, as if that is their place when it is not. Yet, the Beyond Drifting series is only one part of a huge ongoing project that Mandy has called Soup. Here's another image from Soup that I would call Sublime. A galaxy of footballs. Hundreds of disregarded balls from the FIFA World Cup 2014 that have washed up on beaches across the world. Mandy collected and photographed each one of these, layering them on Photoshop to create this breathtaking image. We see trash every day. We see images of plastic taking up space everywhere. Inside whales and turtles, beaches and forests, occupying entire islands. Yet still we throw our trash. Some of us do it with a hint of conscious guilt that is quickly pushed away. It is images like this that captivate and make you confront where your trash actually ends up. In the interview that I did with Mandy for the podcast, she told me that hundreds of people that have heard about the Soup project have sent her plastic objects from the beaches that they visit around the world. So this has now become a communal project. And even if you can't take a picture like this yourself, you can still teach yourself to spot these images and share their message. And while sharing something is no substitute for physical action, it can still inspire collective action and awareness. There are many other images we can talk about. Processing trauma in Joanna Chomali's Savale. Ross McDonald's limbs of improvised prosthetic legs. Gideon Mendel's submerged portraits. So what happens when an image like this takes its own life? Something incredible. Gideon's images are being used as cardboard shields in climate change protests around the world. These particular images traveled through networks until they reached a person who recognized their sublime value and used them to speak 1,000 words. Gideon's message reached thousands. So, what is the future of the image? With the rise of the smartphone camera and digital media, it's definitely here to stay. So we must become sensitized to its message once more. We must eliminate the noise and unearth an unspoken language that can inspire change. With so much information at our disposal, it is tempting to turn it all off. Do not allow yourself to ignore these inspiring stories. Today, information is exponential and at our fingertips, one Google search away. So it is our responsibility to pursue these incredible stories. If you feel the seduction of the sublime in an image that has already been taken, or a moment in your life that begs to be captured, let yourself be seduced. Stop scrolling. and inform yourself. Share it. Stop walking and take that picture. Share it. Empower yourself to discover the sublime. You should, because you can. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.